question on both items 23 and 24 on shop. And
good.
first,
Item number
define
22.
shop for all of the people who've been saying that we're way too involved in alphabet soup.
Define shop. Good idea. SHOP is the State Highway Operation and Protection Program. It's the fix it first, preserve and protect state highway system program of the state. So item 23 is an information item, which is presenting draft amendments to the SHOP guidelines. The commission is required by statute to develop guidelines for the SHOP program. Per the current SHOP guidelines, the commission may amend the adopted guidelines after first giving notice of the proposed amendment, which is what we're doing right here, and conducting at least one public hearing. It's anticipated that the final SHOP guidelines will be brought forward at the March 2022 commission meeting for a public hearing, and then for the commission to consider adopting. Commission staff has worked extensively with Caltrans over the past few months on these amendments. We also held a public workshop last Friday, January 21st, to solicit input and feedback from other partners and stakeholders. We're proposing quite a few changes. Many of them are just small clarifying changes, but I'd like to highlight a few of the more substantial ones in the next couple minutes.
Great.
So first of all, multiple sections, section 3, 10, 26, and 27 were amended to emphasize the importance of engagement with diverse local partners in the development of the SHOP. So we wanted to emphasize the importance of that. Section 12, which is about eligibility, project eligibility, was amended to clarify that bicycle and pedestrian facilities are SHOP eligible operational improvement projects. Sections 17 and 18, which are the TAMP and SHSMP, which, to expand the acronyms, is the Transportation Asset Management Plan and the State Highway System Management Plan. Those are the planning documents that drive, that kind of prepare the way, pave the way for the SHOP program. So those two sections were amended to support the inclusion of CAPDI, and which maybe I should, gosh, what's that acronym? Now I'm having a brain fart. I didn't even think about spelling out.
For transportation and infrastructure.
Thank you.
No problem.
I didn't think about, you don't realize all the acronyms that are in your thing. So we amended those two sections to support CAPDI strategies as well as Caltrans's equity statement in the development and implementation of the TAMP and the SHSMP. And then section 40, which deals with alternative delivery methods, was amended to aid in the management of SHOP projects that are using CMGC, construction manager, general contractor, and design build delivery methods. So that's 4 examples of the proposed amendments that we're using, and the guidelines will help in our continued management of the SHOP in a transparent and accountable manner. That concludes the presentation of this draft guideline update. There's no action required here, but staff is happy to answer questions or take comments if you have any.
Wonderful. Justin, do you have any public comments? And commissioners, if you would like to speak on these guidelines, please, amendments, please turn on your video.
Chair Norton, thank you. We do have public comment at this time.
Okay.
First we have.
Mind if I take public comment first? Okay. Go ahead, Justin.
Thank you. Up first, we have Jonathan Matz.
Hi, thank you. Just a few quick comments on the guidelines, and we're very optimistic about the beginning of the incorporation of complete streets in the state highway program and Caltrans' new complete streets policy. We definitely think that the guidelines could be improved by specifically defining complete streets in there. And I also wanted to sort of zero in a little bit, and I think it's section 25, which talks about public engagement and transparency. And I'll be echoing these comments a little bit on the next item with the actual draft SHOP project list. but there's currently the public currently doesn't have access to a lot of the planning documents that went into the SHOP project. And I think, specifically mentioning in the guidelines requiring publications of things like the complete streets decision documents that are produced for every project, things like that, for the public in order to help the public understand or really gauge to what extent the changes in policy that we've seen over the last couple of years in the department are starting to have impacts on the actual project lists and on the decisions on which elements are included in which projects. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments. Next commenter.
Up next, we have Carter Rubin.
Hi, Chair and Commissioners. This is Carter Rubin. Just wanted to echo Jonathan Matz's comments and also see if it would be possible to see a redlined copy of the SHOP guidelines, just so we can really get clear on the updates and make sure we're providing good comments by March.
So I can address that real quick.
Thank you, John.
If you look at the posted agenda items, and then you go to this item, which is item number 23. I'm going to go to it on my screen so I can make sure I'm not lying to you. At the bottom of the book item, there's where it says the attachments. There's a hyperlink to a redline version of it. So go to the posted agenda item, look at the book item. There's under the attachments, before you get to the actual guidelines down underneath it, there's a hyperlink in that bullet right there. So try that.
I appreciate you drawing my attention to that. I will take a look.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next comment.
Up next, we have David Azevedo.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm on my phone. So
For sure.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Norton and members of the Commission. My name is David Azevedo on behalf of AARP California. We're really excited about this next iteration of the SHOP program, particularly since we were proud to support the governor's executive order in 2017, creating the Master Plan for Aging, which affirms the need for policies that promote healthy aging, especially since a key goal of that Master Plan for Aging is to promote, quote, transportation beyond cars, which is a strategy, as we all know, in which active transportation and complete streets projects are absolutely essential. And a critical part of the MPA is tasking agencies like Caltrans, CalSTA to plan, develop, and complete projects like those in the SHOP program that meet this transportation beyond cars goal. And that is why we are glad as AARP to see Caltrans highlight SHOP projects that seek to meet this goal. As per the previous kind of comments here, from a public accountability perspective, we would like further details and clarity about how these SHOP projects that say that they're active transportation projects are active transportation projects. As we all know, accountability is all about translating complex bureaucracy into something easily understandable to the general public. And so we're just looking for that standard to be met as the SHOP program develops in the coming months. We look forward to working with the Commission, with Caltrans, with CalSTA to implement the governor's executive order and the Master Plan for Aging. Thanks so much for hearing my comments today, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much. And I want to make sure that you heard Lori Waters' testimony also on including more senior projects in the active transportation program, as well as your point about the SHOP program.
Thank you so much. Yes, I heard that and very well received. We're looking forward to more.
Wonderful. Thanks again. Justin, next comment.
Thank you, Chair Norton. I do not see any other attendees indicating they wish to make public comment at this time.
Okay. Well, thank you. I do know that Commissioner Inman and Commissioner Liu wanted to speak on this item, so I want to recognize them both.
Thank you, Chair Norton. I'll go first. So a question, I believe it was Stephen Keck when he was stepping in, talked about a request for additional dollars for vehicle change out in the budget request. So would that come through the SHOP? And if so, does that include the infrastructure?
No, that does not come through the SHOP.
Okay, thank you. I just wonder where they're coming.
Thank you, Mitch, for addressing that. I realize as our pictures are side by side, we're kind of growing to look a little bit alike, so it's kind of scary. But I did want to address that a little more in detail. The equipment replacement program is part of the support of the department. Those operations that are considered support, most support operations do not come before the commission for action.
Okay, thank you. What about the infrastructure to support that equipment? Same answer?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated. There are several different paths for infrastructure to support that equipment. It depends on what kind of infrastructure you're talking about. Some of the requests can come through the shop for facilities, and some will go through the normal budget process. It's very complicated, and I don't have all the details in front of me, but it depends on whether it's a direct transportation related facility or not. So I'd like to defer that answer and get back to you with a little more detail.
Okay, that'd be great. Because I had a question further down in the agenda. I think it's one of our additional funding requests for an equipment yard. And I was asking about, are we planning for the equipment that we know today or that? So thank you. We can have an offline later discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you
so much, Commissioner Inman. Now, Commissioner Liu.
I am so grateful to know that Commissioner Inman, who has spent so many years on the commission and was chair for so long, is still confused about some of these things too. And that's good to know, because I don't think any of us are expected to understand all of it. But what she's bringing up is obviously important, because Caltrans is going to be replacing its fleet, and even if it's a 10-year replacement cycle, as was explained, it's going to be shifting to a much cleaner fleet, and that's good news. That's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to make sure that I heard staff right. When I did my briefing with staff prior to the meeting, I mentioned that I was very grateful that they had decided to put in, equity and climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, CAPTI, language to have some sort of way to address those things during project selection and development. And when I looked at that, and I thought, is that sufficient? Okay, yes, for most normal projects, but if the projects then come back for scope revisions or amendments, do we then have an opportunity to, address equity and CAPTI once again? And we talked about it on Monday, but then I looked back on my notes, and my best recollection was yes-ish, but I'm not 100% sure. So if staff could talk to that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, that was great input. So what we did, it was yes-ish, and then we went back and looked at the guidelines, and we combed through it to see the TAMP and the SHS&P is towards the beginning of the guidelines, because it's towards the beginning of project development. And so we combed through the end to go, where does the guidelines talk about amendments and scope changes and what's allowed? And so what we are thinking, and we can run this past you as a follow-up to this meeting, what we would like to do, and I already put in some changes, is anywhere where it talks about scope changes further down, we would like to point back to these two sections. And I believe if we say TAMP and SHS&P are in line with CAPTI and equity strategies, and we say every amendment you do has to be in line with the TAMP and the SHS&P, which are your planning documents, then that aligns everything the way that we've aligned those formative documents. That's our thought. I can send you a draft of what we think that would look like.
And back to the complicated nature of what we do. But yes, as long as it's clear to everyone that that's what we're doing. I don't want to catch anyone by surprise, and I want people to know and expect, what the process really looks like. But and I think what you're talking about would address my concerns, and also take advantage of opportunities to, address equity and CAPTI issues. if those kind of major amendments are happening to a project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioners, are those your only comments? If so, we'll move on to the item 24, which is the presentation of the draft 2022 SHOP. Mike?
Yeah,
I see you.
I have a couple comments before Mike dives into his presentation, which I'm excited about. This is the information item, and it will be Mike Johnson, Caltrans's asset manager, providing a preview of the draft 2022 SHOP. But first, I just want to give a quick status update on the Commission's adoption schedule and what that's going to look like. So zooming back, Caltrans is required by statute. So before we zoom back, we should see as the Commission by January 31st, statute requires Caltrans to give the Commission the draft SHOP. So we should see that by January 31st. When we get that from them, the statute requires regional transportation agency comments to be included in what we get on January 31st. So to do that, Caltrans distributes the SHOP to regional transportation agencies early on, get their comments and feedback. The SHOP guidelines require that to be distributed to the agencies by December 7th. Caltrans didn't meet that date. However, the program was shared with regional agencies on December 22nd, with comments due on January 10th. And their comments are expected to be included in the submittal that we get on the 31st. And so beyond that, as noted in Executive Director Weiss's comments, there's a public hearing scheduled for Wednesday, February 16th. And so that'll be another opportunity for the public to provide comment and give input. And the final adoption of the SHOP is expected at the March Commission meeting. So that's kind of where we are on the timeline. I'll turn it over to Mike now, and he can give us a preview, and he's got a good presentation for us.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike.
Good afternoon, Chair Norton, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to provide a quick briefing on how the SHOP is developed and hopefully demystify some of the things that we've been talking about in the guideline discussion, and then provide kind of a high-level overview of what's in the 2022 draft SHOP. If we could get the presentation queued up. Next slide, please. So hopefully this will help demystify a little bit of the alphabet soup that you were discussing earlier. These are really the key documents that we use for asset management, and working from left to right. We have the Transportation Asset Management Plan. This is for the state of California. That plan has a state highway system component. It also has a national highway system component as required by federal law. The national highway system component is looking at a system that is jointly owned by the state and cities and counties all over California. That document is a very high-level document, and in order to really run the SHOP, we need to operationalize that, and we do that through the State Highway System Management Plan. This is really the heart of our asset management approach for the SHOP as a whole. The State Highway System Management Plan presents an unconstrained needs assessment and a fiscally constrained investment plan. We all know that we have greater needs than we have dollars. There's some prioritization that has to take place. That's very transparently presented within this plan. It is the State Highway System Management Plan that once approved, we take and we develop very detailed performance plans for each of our 12 districts. And those performance plans have very specific project performance outcomes and has a budget that each of the district directors has to achieve all of those performance outcomes. The districts then take the baton up and they work with their communities and their programs to develop specific projects. And those projects are updated every quarter. And we verify that those projects meet the defined performance requirements and fit within the constrained budget. We present that in something called the 10-year project book. So this is updated every quarter. It's 10 years forward looking. We used to do this as a paper document, but about 2 years ago now, we've moved this all to an online dashboard, projectbook.dot.ca.gov. I've demonstrated this in the past to the commission, and I'm happy to do it again. It's a very powerful resource because it includes GIS mapping of all the projects, a searchable, you could search across all SHOP projects to find any project that involves particular keywords. You can look by year of delivery. You could look using the map. There's many, many ways to find projects that you might want to engage the department in. And each project has details about them. And the details, because it's in a virtual environment, can be substantially more detailed than what we can put in a printed SHOP document. Specifically, the individual components of performance that every project is accomplishing. But that's all exposed within this project book dashboard. That information is, as I mentioned, is 10-year forward looking at any point in time. The most immediate 4 years comprise the SHOP. And so as we develop a new SHOP, like we are with the 2022 SHOP, we'll bring in 2 new years as the 2 initial years of the 2020 SHOP were retired. So through this process, we are specifically tailoring the projects that we're bringing forward to you to accomplish specific outcomes. And these outcomes run over 30 different objective criteria. That objective criteria includes things like pavement condition and bridge condition. It includes safety performance. It includes bike and ped performance in both fixing existing bike and ped facilities as well as building new. It includes environmental initiatives like fish passage and wildlife crossings. It includes facilities. It includes all of the supplementary asset classes that the commission has defined are all in there as their own document or their own objective, excuse me. So this state highway system management plan that feeds this SHOP is producing projects that are tailored to accomplish certain outcomes. And then we check that and test that annually when we present our annual performance benchmark report. And this is where we report to the commission what is the actual measured condition of the pavement or the bridges, or how are we doing addressing various transportation needs. And so this cycle, it just repeats in effect over and over. And that's really how we know that when we get a SHOP document, we can say with great certainty it's consistent with the asset management plan. And we can say with fairly good certainty that it's going to get us to the performance objectives that we're after. Next slide, please. So I wanted to, and just bear with me, if you will, on this, because I'm going to build this slide, and I know this is not typical, but I think it's really important just based on some of the comments that I've seen already. So when we talk about the SHOP, we're looking at a really long-term horizon. If we could advance to the next animation. So the 2022 SHOP is built off the 2019 State Highway System Management Plan. Okay, and that plan covered July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2029. Next. That plan will establish work that will begin in July 1, 2019, will be carried out at project level planning for 2 years till June 30th, 2021. Upon the completion of that 2-year time period, those projects that have formal planning completed will then form the basis for the subsequent SHOP. Next animation. At the same time that that is going on, project level planning, we are starting to build the next years of the shop that are going to go to planning. So the districts they've got new performance objectives because we've added 2 new years on the back end. They're developing new projects to address the performance requirements in the plan. Next. So right now we're working in the 2020 shop. It covers the time period of July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2024. Next. And we're about to move into the 2022 shop. So 2 years are retired, the 2020, 2021, and 2022 years are retired, meaning we've awarded those jobs, they're out in construction, and we're building them, or some of them may be completed at this point. And we're going to add 2 new years into the 2022 shop. Next. So there's this 2-year overlap period. In other words, the 2022 shop includes 2 years that the commission has already programmed. Next. And the planning that we began in July 1, 2019 and finished on June 30th, 2021 is what is feeding these new 2 years that you're going to get. Next. And so as we move forward to the 2024 shop, this all just moves forward in time 2 years. But I appreciate the commission's indulgence here, because I think it's very important that the timeline associated with this and how far in advance the department has to plan work in order to get it into the shop is understood by the commissioners and everybody in attendance today. Next slide. So, John covered some of the engagement opportunities, but it really starts on July 1, 2019. So at that point, the department began formal project level planning on the projects that are coming before you new for the 2022 shop. Our districts around the state are, as they're doing that project level planning, are reaching out and engaging with local partners to make sure that when these projects come forward, we have that local engagement component. As I mentioned, the shop project dashboard is fully transparent, 10 years in the future, updated every quarter. It's a great resource for people that want to understand, where is the shop money going? What is Caltrans planning to do? You can see all of that in the project book dashboard. Then there's been some discussion about the guideline date of December 7th. And yes, the department was a little bit late in getting the draft list to the RTPAs and the MPOs. This is that release of the shop is for our transportation partners to give us their comments back prior to the draft shop coming to the commission, as was mentioned, and also prior to it going to a broader public audience. So that December window of time is really meant, to be a review by transportation partner agencies. Then we have this meeting today and this presentation and opportunity for public comment. And then, as John mentioned, there's a public hearing in February that the commission hosts, and we'll be, able to go in a little more depth on the shop in that hearing. And then, of course, the March 2022 meeting where the shop will hopefully be adopted. But going back to the process of how we got here, the Transportation Asset Management Plan, the State Highway System Management Plan, the shop, and the benchmark report all come before the commission. At each one of those steps along the way, these things are open and available for public comment. In addition, the department solicits comments directly on the TAMP, the State Highway System Management Plan, and the shop. So you know, I think there's always opportunity to do more, to be better at this. And I think the department is certainly, you know, wants to hear those opportunities to be better. But, you know, the review of the shop is not really just about that, you know, several week window in December, right before this meeting. Next slide. So getting to the shop, you know, just a kind of high level overview. There's, and this is all current as of the December commission meeting. It will obviously change with further actions from the commission today. So these numbers will change a little bit, but we're expecting something on the order of 720 projects. Of those, about 2/3 of them are already programmed. So what we call carryover projects. So a little over 500 of them are already programmed. There's about 206 new projects. It's $17.2 billion. That is in fact the correct number. And there's a little bit of rounding on the table on the right. And the shop covers a 4-year period, July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2026. The table on the right shows kind of a high level breakdown of where the shop funds go in terms of the major activity, what we call the anchor activity. And I just want to point out here that, you know, when we look at pavement, for example, which is really the whale in the shop, it's where the bulk of the dollars are going. That is not just pavement. Those are pavement anchored projects, but many of those projects are doing a lot of ancillary highway work. They're doing safety work. They're doing complete streets work. So when you see that number, just know that it's not just asphalt on the highway. It's everything that goes along with a major pavement project in a corridor. Next slide. Just, you know, for I guess trivia purposes, just kind of a breakdown of the cost of the projects in the shop. You know, you could see a lion's share of them, really anywhere from 2 million up to 50, and then there's a few scattering that are bigger or smaller. But just to give everybody an idea of sort of the size of the projects that are in the 2022 shop. Next slide. I'm sorry, next slide. You know, as far as core asset accomplishments or performance, these are being closely matched, and as I pointed out, the projects are specifically tailored to accomplish certain performance outcomes that are necessary for us to achieve the SB1 performance requirements. And so this is a breakdown of some of what the 2022 shop will do in terms of the core assets. It's, you know, over 6,300 lane miles of pavement will be worked on. With the support of the commission and the commission staff in putting some additional bridge work in the last several commission meetings, we've really pushed our bridge accomplishment up. We're over 9 million square feet of bridge deck area that will be addressed in the 2022 shop. That is very convenient because there's a lot of bridge money in the IIJA, and we knew that. So we were a little bit ahead of the game there, but we'll be well positioned. And then you could see our transportation management system elements and culvert work. Next slide. You know, you heard Director Amashakin talk about, you know, the department's commitment to complete streets, and it really, you know, starts at the top, at the director's level. And, you know, you will hear Tony Dang talk about in more detail the complete streets policy. You know, the shop itself is evolving in this regard. And this is some of, you know, the complete streets work that's being accomplished throughout the 2022 shop, showing bike lanes by class on the top, as well as, you know, over 50,000 feet of sidewalk, 22,000 feet of, or sorry, 50,000 crosswalks for safety of our bicyclists and pedestrian, mode users and over 220,000 feet of sidewalk, in addition to transit stop improvements in 121 locations and bus bulb outs and pull outs at 167 locations. And I put this slide in there just, you know, to show that the shop is doing complete streets work. I realize there's, you know, always a desire to do more, but we have to do this in balance with the things that we have to do that are statutorily required. We have court settlements we have to address. We have other mandatory things that the shop must fund, in addition to all the work that we must do to achieve the SB1 commitments. And so it's a significant balancing act that we have to do with the shop dollars that we have. Next slide. So this slide is showing that in effect about 47% of all shop projects, 2022 shop projects, include some bike ped or transit feature. And some may say, well, why not 100%? We just heard, you know, Director Amashakin say, you know, we're going to do this everywhere. You know, we have to understand that there are a number of projects that the department does that are on access controlled highways where bicycle and pedestrians are not permitted, interstates. And then there's other situations where the nature of the work that we're doing is not suitable for complete streets. And these are things like underground work or spot work like lighting, stormwater mitigation, off-site environmental mitigation. These are all examples of projects where it's not feasible to do something because we're not really working anywhere that a bicyclist or pedestrian would want to be. On the right portion of this slide, I'm presenting the trend, and I know that, you know, there's some I guess consternation sometimes about, well, we have some bike and ped features in a project. Is it enough? You know, are you doing what needs to be done? And, you know, we're working very hard to do that. But I wanted to show this trend on the right. And this is the same metric, the percent of projects that include bike and ped or transit features going back to the 2016 shop, just to show that the department is trending to do more and more in this regard. Next slide. Some of the observations for the commission, you know, the department certainly, as John noted, this is our Fix It First program, and we remain committed to that. About 79% of all non-reservation funds are being spent on core asset classes. Our performance-driven asset management approach is really working for us. We're seeing this in a lot of different areas, particularly significantly more efficient pavement projects. And I mentioned that pavement is the whale within the shop. And so as we implement asset management and it becomes sort of the mainstay of our business, it gives us opportunity to do other things that we want to do. I just hit bike and ped pretty heavily. Another observation related to TMS is that the inventory of TMS is growing rapidly, very rapidly. And that, you know, that puts added pressure because these TMS elements, the technology needs to be refreshed at a pretty regular rate. So this is something within asset management that we're monitoring very closely. And then there's been a lot of discussion about equity, and I think there's a lot that Caltrans is working on right now, and I'm not really going to go into all that we're doing with respect to equity. And it's not just Caltrans, it's every DOT in the country is working on this. But for the 2022 shop, we did some analysis at the request of the commission staff to look at the projects as they lay out across income demographics. And I think what we showed is that There is not a large disparity in the condition of the system based on income, which was a really good thing. And we also can show pretty clearly that the project investments that we're making in the 2022 shop very closely mirror the breakdown of the inventory in California. Next slide. So as far as the development schedule, we are required by statute to deliver the 2022 draft to the commission by January 31st. And then we'll have the public hearing, we'll get further feedback. We're continuing to receive feedback from partners, from the public at large on the shop, and we'll continue to address those up until the point we've got to kind of close it down for the March meeting. But there's still time. So if folks have comments that they want to give us on the draft shop, there's multiple opportunities, but the most obvious one would be the public hearing in February. And then the completed shop would need to be submitted by April 1st. So that concludes the quick overview and briefing of how we build the shop and what's in it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mike. So it's Leanne. Chair Norton had to step out for just a moment. Do we have any commissioners that would like to ask any questions or make any comments? I think Commissioner Falcone, you had a question?
Thank you, incoming Chair Eager. Glad to see you in that position. Yeah, thank you for the very thorough presentation, Mike. I have a question. I don't know if it applies to, just projects in general, but I'm particularly interested in how this would be applied to the shop. And applying, the goals of, the Climate Action Plan, for transportation infrastructure and equity in scoring, in scoring projects. I'm interested in the metric that's used to, measure the merits of a project against those goals, and namely the Cal Enviro screen, along with or versus, the individual regional climate indices that individual regions may apply or use. I'm interested in what you use, to kind of score those projects against those goals.
Yeah, thank you. We don't score the projects per se in the manner you're thinking. What we do is once we develop an investment level in a particular objective, we distribute that out to our 12 districts in proportion to where that need exists. And then those local districts are the ones that are actually selecting the locations where the department works. And that's important for both CapTI and also for equity. In other words, we just simply say that we need you to get 100 lane miles of pavement done. We don't tell them where to work on the pavement. So the local district has the opportunity to look at something like an equity index once we get that developed to say, okay, I want to use that as that criteria for where I'm going to choose to work. There are opportunities within the asset management framework to bring that in as a constraint. And that's something we've thought about. I've thought about, and it's one that is being discussed, quite actively nationally in asset management circles. So I think there's a lot in the works, particularly in Caltrans. While we can look at certain things with Cal Enviro Screen, and we did for income only, the California equity, the Caltrans equity index that we're working on is going to be a multi-factored type of index. In other words, it's not just income, it's going to look at pollution and some other things as well. So it's using multiple layers within Cal Enviro Screen. But in terms of the CapTI alignment, there are specific action plans that CAPTI calls for related to the shop, and specifically the State Highway System Management Plan. And we're actively working with our transportation agency to roll those out in our 2023 State Highway System Management Plan, which we're just about to embark on developing.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. And yeah, it'll be just interesting how that's applied, and really interested in how that, how Caltrans works with, the individual districts and the regions, to, because they obviously know, have a little more granular, I would think, picture of the needs of the region and where those, where those vulnerable areas are. And so I'm just interested in knowing that there's that collaboration there.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we saw that on great display with the 710 discussion. So we give Tony resources in District 7, and he's working with, COME and the cities and so forth to identify what those project priorities are within the District 7 region. So really pushing the decision local.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Do we have any other commissioners with any questions or comments? Then I think we have at least 2 public comments.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Eager. We do have 2 attendees with their hand raised at this time. Up first, I'm going to call on Jonathan Matz.
Hello again, and thanks again for the opportunity to speak. Just following up, I kind of previewed this a little bit in my comments about the draft guidelines for the shop. And while it's indisputable, we're very happy to see that there's more bike and pedestrian infrastructure getting incorporated into the shop projects. We're still a long way from really being able to tell if the changes in policy are having a transformational effect on some of the projects beyond, we've seen some figures about a certain amount of 46% of projects having a feature. A complete street feature does not make a complete street in and of itself. And I think what we really need to be able to quantify whether or not the program is starting to match the stated goals that have been identified at an agency level and through the CAPTI. It's really in those planning documents, as I mentioned before, that we need to be able to see, well, okay, 46% is great. How many complete street opportunities have been identified? Where could they have been identified? Maybe in addition to that, if they were identified, was every opportunity seized upon? That really is going to be the proof in the pudding for evaluation of programs like this. And at the moment, we don't have that insight. So I'd certainly encourage, really, I'd encourage the commission to really dig down into those documents and more than anything, make them, publicly available in order to establish the public trust that, what we've seen in terms of very, very ambitious policy goals really start having impacts with every formulation of the shop list. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you for your suggestions. And we have another one, I understand.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Eager. Up next, we have Carter Rubin.
Good afternoon, Commission. Thanks again for the opportunity to comment today. I'm Carter Rubin with NRDC, and I don't think we've engaged too deeply in the SHOP program in the past, but I think Assembly Bill 285 really helped shine a spotlight on the state's big transportation funding programs and opportunities to align them better with the state's climate goals, and that's partly why we're interested in this program now, and really wanted to just chime in to express our support for the increased focus on complete streets. And I think the trend line upwards towards 46% is really encouraging. As Jonathan mentioned, I think we'd really appreciate a chance to sit down with Caltrans staff, if possible, to also kind of dig in on those numbers a little bit and understand kind of which projects are contributing to that 40%, 46%, and how much funding does that represent, and that are going specifically to the complete streets elements versus, some of the other capital construction that might be, part of the project, but not specifically related to bike or pedestrian infrastructure. We've really enjoyed digging in on the interactive project book website, and thank staff for preparing that. It helps us understand these different project elements, although in some cases it was a little bit hard for us to verify some of the data, so around complete streets elements. And so we might appreciate an opportunity to talk with staff directly about how to access that data. In particular, we looked through the SHOP project book that was shared on the Commission website in PDF form. We requested to shop at dot.ca.gov a tabular version of that data, and were declined. So hopefully there's a chance for us to follow up and discuss that further. And then lastly, we noticed several large projects with significant auxiliary lane elements in them, and I think OPR has indicated that auxiliary lanes under a mile are probably not going to increase VMT, but when you look at this entire program, it'd be helpful to understand how much auxiliary lane mileage is included in this program, and what the quantified VMT or greenhouse gas impacts of those projects would be, and if that is consistent with the guidelines around not increasing capacity. So with that, I'll just say thanks again. I think over the next month between now and the next commission meeting, we're eager to dig in on some of the data, and appreciate your time.
If I could just respond quickly, thank you for the questions or the comments. I would highly encourage you to look at the project book dashboard, the electronic dashboard. It is searchable, and you can find every project with an auxiliary lane, for example, and you can download anything you want it to an Excel spreadsheet from that dashboard page. So I think, I don't know who, I'd love to talk to you offline about who you requested electronic version of the shop from, but it is already available to you through the project book dashboard.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I bet a number of stakeholders would be interested if there's a briefing you'd be willing to offer on how to, best use the project book interactive map. That would be much appreciated, and be happy to.
Yeah, I'd be happy to arrange a kind of an overview and training session if that's something that would be helpful.
Great.
Thanks. Yes, I think so.
I think probably for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Thank you
Real
for your
quick.
comments. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Just one more comment from me. That
Yes.
could be something, Mike, we can talk offline, but maybe that's something we can touch on at the hearing. I know we did that at a workshop before. That could be something we could touch on there.
Yeah, we could definitely spend some time just giving a quick demo.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you. Are there any more public comments on tab 24?
Commissioner Eager, I do not see any other attendees indicating they wish to make public comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike and John. Great information, great presentation. We appreciate it. Looking
Thank
forward
you.
to hearing more in the future. So we're going to be moving on to the informational calendar now.
Thank you, Commissioner Eager.
Yes,
And
thank you.
good afternoon, commissioners. Tabs 25 through 36 are information items that have been reviewed and found to have no issues raised by commission staff. Therefore, individual items will not be presented unless specifically requested by a commissioner. If there are no questions or comments, that will conclude the presentation of the information calendar. Looks like we have one.
Yeah, I'd like to move on as quickly as we can, but I did have something I brought up with staff about item 26, the delegated authority, where I saw just time after time where the cleanup of homeless encampments was considered an emergency allocation. And it just seems to me that this is something that we're going to have to expect and anticipate and probably program for. And there will be probably some emergency needs, but Mitch, I think, may be interested in creating a reserve or some other way of doing this. And I was wondering if we had some ideas on how to deal with this in some way other than an emergency allocation. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll certainly give that a thought. I certainly did say that, and I will not claim that that was a good idea at all. That was just a just stream of consciousness thinking about it. I'll need to ask Tim and John and Gertej later whether that was a good idea and what I should have said.
Right. No, I get that.
Here's John to tell me what I should have said.
I'm not going to tell you what you should have said, but we did interact with Caltrans, and I had a couple conversations with them about that, and it's not figured out yet, but I know that's a good idea, and you're not the only one that has thought that direction, Commissioner Lewin. So they're starting to think that direction and have those discussions with maintenance, and I don't know that there's a solution yet, but they're working on that, and we'll follow up with that as things develop.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. With item 26 now dealt with, can we take the entire information calendar and move forward? Gertej?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so considering that we've moved through the information calendar, we are going to take up items 46 and 87 because we have a recusal from Commissioner Falcone and Commissioner Inman. And the same is a recusal with 87. So as is tradition, Commissioner Falcone and Commissioner Inman, if you could explain your recusal before you leave the room.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll jump in first. So I wish to recuse myself from item 46 and item 87 as my employer, Majestic Realty, has holdings in the immediate proximity of the Otay Mesa border project.
Okay, thank you so much. And Commissioner Falcone?
Yes, thank you. I am recusing myself out of abundance of caution in that I have a client that is looking at potential assets along the corridor in Otay Mesa.
Okay, wonderful. Well, if you could technically leave the room and be off camera, Commissioner Inman, and we will take up those two items. Gertej?
Yes, thank you, Chair Norton. Commissioners, tabs 46 and 87 are action items and will be taken together. Tab 46 is a Caltrans Director's Deeds item to approve the sales of state-owned excess lands. Tab 47 is a coordinated border infrastructure program allocation request of $24.9 million for the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry Segment 3A project. Staff has reviewed tabs 46 and 87 and recommends approval.
Thank you very much. Could I get a motion on both of those items?
So moved.
Second, Martinez.
Thank you. Alvarado moves, Martinez seconds. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Eager.
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby.
Aye.
Mr. Guardino.
Aye.
Commissioner Liu.
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
Commissioner Tavoloni. Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Great. Now we're going to move to the rest of the consent calendar. We can bring Commissioners Falcone and Inman back and take up items 37 through 45 and then 47 through 56. Gertej?
Commissioners, tabs 37 through 45 and 47 through 56 are action items listed as part of the consent calendar. Please note the changes to tabs 37 and 45 as shown on the change list. With these changes, staff recommends approval of tabs 37 through 45 and 47 through 56 on the consent calendar.
Fantastic. Could we please have a motion for the consent calendar approval?
So moved. Eager?
I'll second Falcon.
Great. Eager moves, Falcon seconds. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Eager,
Aye.
Commissioner Falcon,
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby,
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Liu, Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni, Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Great. And as item 58 has been withdrawn, we're going to take items 57 and 59 together. Jose Oseguera.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and members of the public. Just to clarify again, item 58 has been withdrawn. Items 57 and 59 will be considered jointly. Item 57 is an action item. This is the final EIR for the Nevada 49 Corridor Improvements Project. Caltrans determined that environmental impacts could be reduced to less than significant levels. Item 59 is an action item. This is the final EIR for the Arroyo de la Laguna Bridge project. Caltrans determined that environmental impacts could be reduced to less than significant levels. Staff recommends approval of items 57 and 59.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to confirm with Justin that 57 and 59 have no public comment, nor did the consent items that we voted on. Is that correct?
Chair Norton, that is correct. We did not have public comment on those items.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't want to forget that. So could we please have a motion on items 57 and 59, unless there are questions from, I think I heard Commissioner Liu. Second, who would like to second?
I'll second it. Davis.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Douglas, can you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Eager,
Aye.
Commissioner Falcon,
Aye.
Commissioner Grisby,
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni, Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Fantastic. We are going to go on to items 60, 61, and 62. We're going to take them each separately. Hannah Walter, could you start 60 on the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee membership appointments? Thank you, Hannah. Your mic isn't on.
Thank you. Okay. Tab 60 is the appointment of 3 new individuals to the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee. Our previous legislative people who represented the Senate and Assembly have moved on, and so has our social equity advocate. So we'd like to thank Senator Bell, Assemblymember Chu, and Richard Marcantonio for all of their great work on the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee. And we'd also like to recommend that Senator Newman, Assemblymember Laura Friedman, and social equity advocate Axel Santana be appointed to the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee in their place. Our book item actually says that we're recommending approval of these 3 candidates. I'd like to just make a little correction and say that per statute, the approval process is that the executive director of the commission recommends the candidates to the chair of the commission, who consults with the CalSTA secretary. And that's actually how the selection process works. But we've traditionally brought these candidates to the commission for endorsement, and we would like to continue to do that. So our request today for the commission is we request that you endorse these 3 candidates for the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee.
So do you need a motion, or can we endorse by acclamation?
I think you can just endorse by affirmation, but Doug, what do you think?
Yes, endorsement by affirmation is acceptable.
Okay, so commissioners, does anyone have wish to be opposed to these nominees? Speak now. If not, we will consider all of these nominees approved by acclamation. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to go to item 61, Tim Silverman. Complete Streets Directors Policy.
Yeah, I'm just working on my camera here. There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Commissioners, item 61 is an information item. Caltrans adopted a new director's policy regarding complete streets on December 7th, 2021. Tony Dang, Caltrans Sustainability Deputy Director, is here to provide a presentation on the Caltrans Complete Streets Director's Policy. As soon as I can see Tony, we'll turn it over to him. There he is.
All right, good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, and thank you for having me. My name is Tony Dang. I'm the Deputy Director for Sustainability with Caltrans, and I'm very excited to share, hot off the presses, our new Director's Policy on Complete Streets. Next slide. So as the Commission and our partners are aware, the Department has been working over the past several years to really establish and center our work as a State Department of Transportation on our foundational principles of climate action, equity, and safety. And we've worked to embed these into our foundational documents, such as our strategic plan and the California Transportation Plan 2050. And sitting at the intersection of these foundational principles is a complete streets approach that better centers walking, biking, transit, and rail into the work that we do as the State Department of Transportation. We really view this new policy as a critical implementation step, not only of our foundational principles, but of the CALSTA Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure Investment Framework. Sorry, I'm stumbling a little bit. I'm trying my best to avoid acronyms.
Thank you very much.
Next slide. And so we've worked to update our previous Complete Streets policy to better align with and reflect the department's evolving work on complete streets. In other words, I think that the new policy marks not the start of the department's work and commitment to complete streets, but a new chapter of our evolving work and approach to complete streets. And at the core of this new policy is an organizational-wide commitment and priority to encouraging and maximizing walking, biking, transit, and rail. In terms of what the policy requires, we've pulled out kind of the operative clause within the policy. And it states that in locations where people walking and biking are expected, that all transportation projects funded or overseen by the department will provide comfortable, convenient, and connected complete streets facilities unless an exception is documented and approved. In terms of what those exceptions look like, we have established procedures such as our Complete Streets decision document process, which we rolled out early last year to guide implementation, to guide the exception process for our capital projects. Particularly our shop projects. And we're working right now to develop a similar process to guide our major highway maintenance projects. Both of these processes include what we view to be very common sense exceptions to allow for the delivery of our critical maintenance and rehab projects that are in line with the state's Fix It First goals. So just some examples of what those exceptions look like. As my colleague Mike Johnson mentioned, when we're doing a project that's on a limited access facility where people walking and biking are not legally allowed, we're not expecting that for the project to go out of its way to implement a complete streets element. Additionally, projects with a very specific scope, such as a culvert repair job or a bridge scour repair job, we're also not expecting that those types of projects would be required to comply with the policy. Next slide. I wanted to take a minute to just highlight some of the key differences with this new policy compared to our previous policy. So I think one of the biggest changes is we've elevated this to a director's policy, which really sets a fundamental direction for the department. I think secondly, you'll notice that in the prior policy, staff were really encouraged to leverage opportunities to maximize complete mobility for all users. However, this new policy, I think, takes a more directive approach. It's really around setting the expectations that the default starting place for a project will be to integrate walking, biking, and transit needs right at the project outset, which we know is the most cost-effective approach to integrating complete streets facilities, rather than trying to go back and modify a project after it's been started. Lastly, the new policy also greatly expands upon the expected roles and responsibilities that we have for our staff. And it includes a requirement for our districts to formally designate one or more Complete Streets coordinators that we view as playing a key role in supporting our project teams to maximize opportunities for including Complete Streets in all project phases. Next slide. I also wanted to take a few moments to just pull out some key highlights from the policy to share with you all. So here you'll see in various ways how we've codified our commitment to partnerships and strengthening our partnerships both with communities and our agency partners. We want our project teams to work towards ensuring that the projects that we deliver are connecting to existing and planned local and regional facilities, because we want to ensure that as a states and as the transportation sector, we're delivering a complete network. You'll also see that we're committed to working towards identifying and removing the policy and procedural barriers to locally sponsored complete streets projects that are on the state highway system or across the state highway system. I think at the end of the day, we as the department do not want to be the reason why a local project does not happen or is not designed and implemented to the world-class design standards and aspirations that we have with this policy. Next slide. You'll also see that we're really providing direction from the top within this policy to our teams to maximize the use of design flexibility that they have. We really are working to train and educate our staff that we want them to design and deliver the right project that meets the community's mobility, safety, and access needs. Lastly, the new directives policy integrates our foundational principle of equity by directing our project teams to prioritize underserved communities in their project development and implementation processes. Next slide. Now, we know a policy is only as good as its implementation, and so the department has identified a number of key high priority actions that we are committed to delivering in the near term to shepherd implementation of this policy. At the center of these actions will be the development of what we're terming contextual design guidance. So through this design guidance, we're aiming to really detail from the department's perspective, what are the minimum expectations for different complete streets facilities by place type. And what I mean by that is we recognize that what is needed in a downtown urban core is going to look much different than what is needed in a more suburban or rural community, and much more detailed guidance needs to be developed in order to address those context-specific needs. Next slide. And as I've mentioned, we're committed to championing design flexibility within the department to train and equip our project teams with the skills, training, and resources that they need to design projects that, as I've said, are right-sized and meet the community's needs. Next slide. I've mentioned the Complete Streets decision document, and we're working to update that process to reflect another key aspect of the new policy, which is elevating that authority when it comes to making exceptions to the policy to an executive level. So this process will be revised to provide that authority to the district directors. It will also include some improvements to the process to enable improved monitoring and evaluation of these new processes. As I mentioned, this is a new process that we rolled out early last year, and we really want to take the time to evaluate and really see the impact of these new policies and procedures. Next slide. I've also mentioned that we're working to develop a new process similar to the Complete Streets decision document, focused on our maintenance projects, because we recognize that integrating Complete Streets elements with our highway maintenance projects is likely one of the most cost-effective ways to advance Complete Streets at minimal cost and with minimal impacts to project delivery. We're aiming to have this process and roll out trainings to our staff within the next few weeks. And we're expecting for this new process to take effect starting with our highway maintenance projects starting in fiscal year 22-23. Next slide. We're also very much focused on enhancing the training and knowledge base of our staff. So we're launching an internal Complete Streets hub to ensure that we're not just developing knowledge of our staff in silos, but that we're developing the knowledge of our staff in a coordinated fashion to ensure that Complete Streets really are being integrated across the lifespan of a project and throughout the development process. Next slide. And lastly, we recognize that these actions are not exhaustive and that there are likely a lot more actions that we need to take on as a department to really see this implementation through. And so we're committed to developing a new Complete Streets action plan that will serve not only as a tool for us to measure and evaluate the department's progress, but also to aid us in communicating our efforts to the Commission as well as to the public. We're intending for the action plan to be developed and rolled out on a biennial basis. Last slide. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the commissioners or the public may have.
Thank you very much for this very thorough presentation. According to Justin, we have no public comment on this particular item. And so, commissioners, are there any questions you have? Or Mitch, it seems like you want to speak on this item.
Well, I will defer to Commissioner Liu and speak after he's had the opportunity.
Do we have the same comment or question?
Well, I think at least one of them is.
Okay. Well, the first comment is congratulations on the new job and thank you for coming over to help us work on these complex transportation issues. But my question is, it wasn't 100% clear to me when I read the policy, which, you know, generally just fantastic and huge improvement. But when I read it, it didn't really lay out whether it applies to all projects or newly proposed projects or, you know, what phase state. I mean, if you're still working on that, you're still working on that, but it would be helpful to know if you figured it out.
Yeah, so we're relying on our existing department procedures to outline exactly where the policy applies. I think at a minimum, we fully expect all new projects for the new policy to apply. In terms of older projects, what we've outlined within the Complete Streets decision document process is for all projects starting with the 2022 SHOP projects to be required to use that process. So we're intending for the policy to have an impact on the 2022 SHOP to the greatest extent possible.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Liu. Now, Mitch, your questions?
So I just want to make sure I understand that. So if something is programmed for construction, would be coming in for an allocation in, you know, next fiscal year, your expectation is, you know, even though it's almost at the end of design, that they go back and look at Complete Streets. And so let me answer. So I'll let you answer, I guess.
Sure. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that when we rolled out the Complete Streets decision document process, we required that all 2022 SHOP projects and SHOP PIDs go through that process. So within that process, the project team should have spelled out what Complete Streets facilities should be incorporated at that point in time. And the way that the process works is that at each stage in the project development process, there's kind of a validation checkpoint where the project teams, if they are then removing any Complete Streets facilities, there's some checks there that need to be met.
Okay, well, I guess I would encourage you to be more aggressive than that, because one of the things we saw with the Complete Streets reservation is that you guys were able to go back and look at things that were going to be in construction in the short term. So I hope this isn't something that we don't see the actual fruits on the road, you know, of the work for, you know, 3 or 4 years down the line. 2 other questions. The Complete Streets coordinator, how is that going to be different than the bicycle coordinators you're already required to have in each district? Is this in addition to, or just a bigger focus for that person?
I think that's exactly right, Mitch, that there's a bigger focus, right? I think that Complete Streets is not just about bicycling, it's also about walking, it's also about transit. And I think that in particular, this issue around how we integrate transit and rail aspects into projects is very key. And this is going to be definitely be an area of growth and work for the department and for the Complete Streets coordinators to tackle.
Good. I hope it's not taking away work from someone who's focused on biking. That's a statutory requirement for that coordinator. But I hope we're able to get more resources to look at this, because this is a great change you guys are laying out there, and but it's a big change for you as an organization. My last question is, you mentioned networks. Those are critical to people really being comfortable biking and reaching and connecting origins and destinations. I want to encourage you guys to think about, even if there's not a network yet, if your facility is the barrier, that may have prevented the network from growing up around it. And so, even though it may look like, as with any multi-phase project, you're just doing a piece of it and it's not connecting to anything. I hope when you're going in, you're looking at it that way and saying, okay, here's one phase. We're not connecting the whole network or the whole length of it, but this is the piece that we own and we're covering our responsibility.
And Mitch, I absolutely agree with you. I think you'll see in the policy, we've included language around not just existing networks, but planned networks as well. And we have a number of processes that we've rolled out on the early side of project development in the planning phases to really direct staff to take a look at what local and regional agencies have on the books, so that when we are developing projects, we're either connecting to them or not creating that barrier or worsening that barrier.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Alvarado, you have some questions?
I just wanted to Mitch kind of brought it forward a little bit, but I just want to make sure that we are looking forward enough ahead that we're not going to get a bunch of redesign come through. That's my only concern, Tony, is that, we've, especially like a bridge replacement, not a big bridge replacement, but a bridge in a rural neighborhood, that we don't come back. I'll give you a good one, Lagunitas. I mean, how many times and how much money have we got on that little bridge? And to have that being stopped because it doesn't meet the complete street requirements would be more than a crime. Should be punishable by whatever. So I just want to make sure that we don't have a lot of redesigns coming through, and that we get far enough ahead of these folks as they come through on the design, that's included in the project.
I have a question, and that is, how can we incorporate and be forward thinking as Commissioner Alvarado is talking about, and also include things like broadband and EV conveyance as you're looking at some of these complete streets and new paving elements, because a lot of mode shift is going to require access to apps and needing, broadband service. Can you talk about this sort of dig once and making sure that you can still have good road quality, especially when, if you're putting in bike lanes and pedestrian lanes, any cracks in roadways make it very dangerous to be a cyclist?
Thanks for the question, Sharon Norton. I will have to admit that is not my area of expertise, and I'm happy to follow up after consulting with my colleagues who are overseeing the broadband efforts. But I think as a department, we are very much committed to a dig smart approach to our projects and with broadband.
Fabulous. Thank you, because that really has a big impact on not only mode shift, but safety, especially for women who are looking at being able to go from mode to mode and have access to hubs, and especially traveling at night. So this is a big priority for women and seniors. So I appreciate that you're looking at that. Commissioners, are there any other comments you have on this particular item? We have one public comment. Justin, can we move forward with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Norton. We do have one attendee looking to make public comment at this time. We have Peg Pinard. Peg, you're free to unmute yourself. Peg Bernard, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment. Not hearing any response at this time, Chair Norton, and I have not received a written response from Peg either, so thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, commissioners, that is going to end day one of our meeting. We will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you again.